Did you know there were 5 times as many IPOs in India in 2024 compared to 2019? I know what you're thinking. It's all the result of the booming SME exchange. But you would only be partially right. Here's a really surprising fact when you look at the data. There were 5 times as many SME IPOs in 2024 compared to 2019. But the main board saw 6 times as many IPOs. I'm Krish Vathare, a public markets investor, and in this video, we're going to look at the data to answer the question, what happened in India's IPO market in 2024? We're going to start with some useful data points and then try to understand conditions that enable these listings. Finally, we will assess the implications of these IPOs for investors. Nothing in this video on this channel is investment advice, nor a recommendation to or not to buy, sell, or hold any security. We're happy to partner with the 01 Media Network to bring you useful and interesting insights and information from the world of business and investing. So go ahead and like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. As you can see from this table from the 2024 Capital Markets Yearbook by India Data Hub and Zerodha, the primary markets were in fact rather active last year. So active, in fact, that for the second year in a row, India saw more IPOs than any other country in the world. One of the highlights of the year was Hyundai listing its local arm in India's largest ever IPO. $3.3 billion or 28,000 crores was raised through the process, making this the second largest IPO in the world in 2024. While many pointed out the tough to digest valuations of many IPOs, it is a sign of the deepening of the Indian market that it could absorb a listing of this size. In fact, you may be surprised to learn that about 1.7 lakh crore was raised through Indian IPOs in 2024. The data from the Capital Markets Yearbook reveals that the SME IPO market allowed companies to raise thrice as much on average compared to the 2019 average. While the main board saw 6 times as many IPOs in 2024 as in 2019, the average amount raised was up only about twofold at roughly 1,800 crores. Now, all this data points to one obvious truth: the burgeoning local appetite for equity. I won't bore you with all the data on equity flows and SIPs. You know that as well as I do. The important point, though, is that such flows create conditions that make going public more attractive. Mutual funds that are unable to allocate meaningfully to cash often have to look to new issues to deploy meaningful amounts of capital inflows. This is especially true for mid and small cap focused funds. So IPOs, along with rights issues and FPOs, serve to absorb chunks of liquidity during bull markets. The unfortunate truth, though, is that such conditions often signal the petering out of a bull market. My goal with this video is to focus on the broad data to understand what transpired in the primary markets in 2024. But I have to add, there were some ludicrous offers being made to the public in recent years. I hear a lot of investor money and angst could have been saved if fund managers had to write a one-page public report explaining their theses for buying a lot of these issues. I imagine this would have been a necessary disincentive. The winners in some ways over recent years have been the VC and PE funds that have gladly offloaded stakes at fanciful valuations. It is astonishing to observe how much valuations often increase between the final private round and the IPO, which may be only a year apart. The more I think about it, the more strange some of the mutual fund investments in IPOs in recent years seem. Retail investors have also overeaten in this equity feast. How else can some of these oversubscriptions be explained? Look at the oversubscription data. Bajaj Housing, for instance, raised about 6,500 crores through its IPO. That issue was oversubscribed 68 times. Wari Energies raised 4,300 crores. The oversubscription, 81 times. But was there actually 2, 3, 4 lakh crore worth of demand for these companies? Of course not. Thirst for listing day gains is the obvious explanation for these numbers. And of course, those that did get allocated shares in many of these IPOs were laughing all the way to the bank. A data point that did surprise me, though, was a split of primary market funding between fresh issues and OFS. The difference between the two simply is that in a fresh issue, the company issues new shares to the public and the proceeds of the IPO go to the company. In an offer for sale or OFS, the proceeds go to existing shareholders who are selling some or all of their shares in the company. My guess, before I read the capital markets yearbook, was that the primary market proceeds would be skewed heavily in favor of offers for sale. There have been years with twice the ratio, and this has important implications and takeaways for investors. The end of bull markets tend to have higher ratios of public issues to market cap. In fact, lower ratios tend to be associated with subdued markets. Looking at all this information, what I can see is that 2024 was a record-breaking year in some ways, most notably in that over 2.1 lakh crore was raised through public issues, significantly higher than previous years. Yet, in many ways, 2024 wasn't anomalous at all, looking at the average IPO values or the public issue to market cap ratio. Amazingly, in 2024, offers for sale accounted for just 45% of primary market fundraising. That means for every rupee raised in the primary market in India in 2024, 55 paise went to the issuing company. Now, before we discuss the implications of these IPOs, I want to point out what may be the most important data point. Public issues, comprising IPOs, rights issues, and FPOs, accounted for 0.5% of the overall market's capitalization. This is not a particularly unusual number, despite a six-fold increase in main board IPOs and major listings such as Hyundai, Swiggy, and Vishal Megamart. In studying the primary market data, what we can say conclusively was that a certain amount of froth and complacency had crept into the Indian investor, both retail and professional. And as we have seen since the September peak, both have been clinically dealt with. It'll be interesting to see how the IPO market progresses in coming years. Let me know in the comments if you think India will retain its position as one of the largest IPO markets in the world in 2025. Thanks for watching.